Hello, welcome to Agile World. Hello, Sabrina. You're looking amazing. Just coming into summer. Hey, wait a second. Weren't you a blonde last week?
No, I wasn't a blonde last week. Are you cheating on me with another co-host?
I'm not saying anything. I don't even want those words to get into my vocabulary.
Wow.
My wife would kill me.
It's only
Um,
been a year and a half, and that's it. You're moving on to another co-host. I'm not happy with that. No, I'm not being blonde. But now you're actually saying that, I think I'd be quite interested to maybe try it. Maybe I should get some wigs and surprise you one day.
okay, now I'm freaked out. Hello, we have an amazing guest today. We got Daniel Vacanti. So excited to hear from him. Daniel, please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you end up in this situation with us.
I can maybe answer the first question. I'm not so sure about the second. I should probably start off by saying, for what it's worth, I was a blonde last week. I don't know if that
matters. Maybe it was you.
Apparently, blonde have so much more fun.
First of all, thank you so much for allowing me to be on your show. I mean, I know I'm bringing the average down a little bit, but I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here. Say a little bit about myself. That's simultaneously my favorite topic and my least favorite topic is how I talk about myself. So I don't know. I got into Agile 20-ish years ago, a little over 20 years ago. I probably shouldn't date myself, but a little over 20 years ago. Mostly from the development side. But then, as you do, you quickly cross over, or at least as I did anyway, quickly cross over from development into management. And then you quickly learn that how everybody does management, they just do it wrong. So it's like, okay, I can do it. I can do this thing and I can do it better. So did management around about 2006, 2007, that kind of time frame. Was on a team in Seattle at a company called Corbis. And that team developed, we developed what came to be known as Kanban, at least Kanban for knowledge work anyway. So I've been doing the Kanban thing pretty much ever since. In 2014, I published my first book that was more around flow metrics. In 2017 or 18, I published the second book, which is more around forecasting, probabilistic forecasting. And then most recently, we've a bunch of us in the Kanban community have gotten together and just started a community-based initiative called prokanban.org, which is meant to be a safe, inclusive, diverse place to come and learn about all things flow. So I don't know, how do I do it for 25 words or less? How do I do for introducing myself?
Love that. I want to delve more into this book, The Flow Metrics.
Okay.
Tell us more about this. That I'm intrigued in. Go for it.
Okay. So,
tell us the entire book so we don't have to buy it.
No. We will put the link to the book below. Don't worry about it.
I'm pretty sure that's the first time anyone's ever said they've been intrigued by a book about flow metrics. But
I mean, it's a big thing at the moment. Metrics. Everyone's struggling, especially when it comes to agility. There's multiple different metrics out there, but what fits best?
Yeah. So the full title of the book is called Actionable Agile Metrics for Predictability. And what it's really about, honestly, if I'm being completely fair, it kind of reads more like a textbook than anything else. But it's really about how to use flow metrics to drive improvements in your process with the ultimate end result, or hopefully the end goal, being predictability. How do we answer that question? When will it be done in a complex environment? And how can these flow metrics help us to do that? So I focus on 4 of the basic metrics and talk about how you can leverage them for, like I said, for better improvement and better predictability in your world.
So one of the problems I have with metrics in general is the assumption that there's a common interpretive value of metrics given across all teams, which is not true. And so when someone says one team does this work this quickly and another team does it at this speed, you have to go, well, what was the work? What were the skill bases of the people doing the work? What was the previous knowledge base? How long has the team been together? Does your book kind of cover off the sort of prelim characteristics of saying that these metrics can determine flow?
So yes and no. a lot of the book goes into how most of those things don't matter when it comes to, especially from a predictability perspective. A lot of those things really don't matter. We think they matter, but they don't matter. But I think even more importantly than that, I think coming at it from the perspective of the team is, in my not so humble opinion, maybe I should say, coming at it from the perspective of the team is the wrong perspective. We should always be coming at it from the perspective of the customer. What does the customer see? What does the customer see in terms of how long does it take for things to get delivered? What does the customer see in terms of how many things am I getting delivered? Those types of things. And once you start coming at it from the perspective of the customer, you start defining these metrics in terms of the customer. I think that's probably the biggest problem with traditional agile metrics is they're not defined in terms of how the customer sees the world. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so this goes back to the problem that we get in development where developers say, well, we delivered the journey, but the customer goes, but it doesn't do anything.
Exactly.
Because we delivered the journey as it's been broken down into a small enough piece for us to work on, but actually that thing is not a journey, that's a slice of a journey, and the customer gets nothing at the end.
Correct. So, I feel like the more and more that we can shape our process to be the language of the customer, to be, the expectation of the customer, whatever the word is you want to use there, the more that we can do that from an agile perspective, the more successful that we're going to be. Just kind of by definition. I mean, if we're delivering value for our customers, we're successful, right? Period. Right.
Well, so I originally come from usability and UX, and I followed user stories into Agile to make sure that they were properly handled, and found out they weren't being, because they were becoming 2-liners instead of 3 pages. And they were often being broken down into too small a set of pieces to actually deliver any value to the customers. So often see delivery of things that would actually damage the reputation of companies. And everyone was excited. And how do we get the mindset of developers move beyond I did what I got told to do as opposed to I delivered something that was useful?
I think there's usually such a disconnect between the people who are actually doing the work and the people consuming the work. And I know that Agile has tried really, really hard in the past couple of decades to kind of break down those walls, but I think those silos exist. I mean, how many people on a development team actually get to sit side by side the person who's using their product? I mean, I think Nordstrom's has a great video out there on this. I think it's from a usability perspective too, Karl. If I have my reference quoted properly, forgive me. I'm not drunk enough to be doing this.
So you said we would have got the shot glasses out.
Well, you can see how my whiskey lined up behind me.
All right, okay. So I think the best thing I ever gave any development team was a video recording of some users trying to use the software that they just released, and they had no idea how profane and angry users could be when delivered with stuff that didn't do anything. Or worse still, being told that it delivered something that it doesn't do is kind of like the ultimate sin for customers. All the internal teams were so excited they delivered this new functionality, but actually they broke 3 other pieces of functionality in delivering it. Exactly. So I think that gave them a proper sense of relative engagement with the customers, but they still didn't get proper engagement because the organization didn't allow for it.
Yeah. If I can do another shameless plug, I did start a software company based on that first book, and it is called the software is called Actionable Agile Analytics. We can talk about some of that if you want to, but everything that you're saying there, Karl, is was my experience, and to be honest, it's maybe counter to what the common perception of customers are, but I think at the end of the day, your customers are generally fairly forgiving and fairly understanding. And what I found is usually customers don't necessarily care so much that you broke something, like you push something into production and you broke it. What they care about is if you don't listen to them when they tell you that, and that you don't fix it in a reasonable time frame. That's what they care about. They know things are going to break. They know that mistakes happen. They almost really kind of expect it. They're almost usually surprised when something doesn't break, right? But if you don't listen to them and you don't address their concerns in a reasonable time frame, that's when they start to become upset, and rightfully so.
So not many people. Sorry.
Oh, Karl, I knew this would happen as usual.
So not many people have focused on the feedback loop, have they? They've all focused on the other parts of Agile, and they've not really built the feedback loops except as retrospectives on the work, not retrospectives on the impact of the work. Is that where your consultancy is based, and the analytics around that?
Kind of, in that, because as you can imagine, my very, very strong bias when we talk about Agile, my very, very strong bias is toward a more flow-based approach, Kanban, if you will. A lot of people, especially when they're doing Kanban, a lot of people like to steal, say, from Scrum specifically, and have this definition of done, which is perfectly fine, and I have no problem with it. The problem usually with definition of done is, again, it's definition of done of the work.
Yeah.
Right. There is, as you were saying, Karl, there's usually not, that definition of done usually doesn't contain that. Did we actually follow up with the customer to see if it was something that they really wanted? And so if you're looking at this from a Kanban board perspective, yes, you can have on your board a done column, or, an in production column, or whatever you might call it. But a good friend of mine, don't tell him that I called him a friend, by the way, but a good friend of mine, his name is Pratik Singh. And he's a big believer in done is not the final column on your on your Kanban board. It's a validation or something.
Yeah,
did you validate? Yeah, did you validate it with your customer? And then, even more importantly, I think this is where you're going, Karl, is did we take that information that we actually got back from the customer with that validation and feed it back into what we're going to work on in the future? So there's a whole bunch of potential states of your workflow, well beyond, is this thing actually in production or not?
I'm almost feeling there's definitely got to be another recording with your friend. For those who are listening on podcast, quotes there. I almost feel we need to get your friend on a recording with you.
I will not be seen in public with him. Have you? I don't know if you probably. I'm going to put you on the spot, but you probably haven't seen our Drunk Agile podcast. Have you heard of our Drunk Agile podcast?
No, but it's something me and Karl. I'm not going to lie. So me and Karl have. I think we did a podcast once together related to a different subject where we did it drunk. And
we did it while drinking. May have been drunk. I was just warming up.
I'm not going to lie. I have experienced drunk agile planning, and it was an amazing experience. And I do actually promote it. The first, we did it over a 4-hour period, believe it or not. 4 hours worth, and you go through a mixture of emotions where at the very beginning you're extremely inspirational, you're extremely excited, then the inspiration in the middle part gets a bit crazy, but you get these ideas that you would never have thought of, which you can still action. Then you get to like a third section of it where it just gets a little bit silly, and by the end of it, and I know my colleagues who I did it with will be listening to this, I won't name their names, but there was crying, emotional outbursts, kind one. It actually brought us closer as a team, and we created this most amazing roadmap and direction to what our next steps are. But there is a limit that you have to understand when time is to cut off and shut down. The time is to cut off.
Sounds like survivalism.
I'm a full believer. I think everyone should try it. And if you want to invite us to something like that, please do. Me and Karl do like a drink.
You jumped the gun there. I was going to say we should definitely have you on Drunk Agile if you were game. We're whiskey drinkers, just so you know. We are whiskey drinkers. But you can bring your favorite tipple. We are kind of bigoted.
Not that I'm going to advertise.
No branding, Karl. No branding.
But this. So that I like fermented water with sugar in it.
So can you tell us a little bit more about this actionable agile analytics? I'm intrigued in that as well.
Well, back in 2013 or whenever I started work on it, I was just so frustrated with the state of agile tooling. Not that tools are necessarily bad, because now, having built a tool, I know that all tools are good and all tools are bad. It really just depends on how you use them, right? But it was pretty much your only choice, just like today, your only choice is Jira, right? Everybody uses Jira because everybody uses Jira. That's just the way it goes.
But the thing is, it's not an agile tool. It existed before Agile, and they shoved some Agile terminologies and data points in it, but it doesn't allow for concurrent working, which is like the entire point of Agile.
Yeah, and the metrics piece of Jira kind of exemplifies that.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. So I jumped the gun there. I said sucks. It does suck. It does suck.
Sorry, are we going to be, this is going to be putting a PG on this now?
No, it's not. That was just a word. You don't need to bleep that one out. I'm sorry. My frustration. You said reporting, you said that. I'm frustrated with it. Please, that company that owns it, please feel free to contact me. I've got some questions. Carry on. I'm sorry.
Some questions and some statements, it sounds like.
Yes.
But it's not even all Jira's fault, is because the Agile world in general has been sold, a bill of goods has been sold snake oil. Maybe I got to come back and we do a whole show just on Storypoints, right? I mean, don't even get me started
please.
We did a show on Storypoints with a well-known agilist based in Glasgow, and he basically said that you shouldn't be using story points beyond the planning. And
don't give it away. We'll put the link in the
text. Put the link in the thing.
Oh, we will. But it created a meetup that had a really quite a lot of people turn up in a very interesting conversation.
I would go even further. Sorry to interrupt. I'd go even further.
No problem.
And say you shouldn't be using story points. Full stop. I mean, I think they're evil even from a planning perspective. I think a lot of people like to say, oh well, but they're great for conversations. No, they're just. I think they're just evil. I'm not going to pull any punches here. There are much better ways to have effective conversations around, what can we do and what can't we do. But that was the state that kind of, unfortunately, still kind of is the state of Agile way back when. And like I said, nowhere was anybody really focusing on these flow metrics, and these flow metrics from the customer's perspective. So all the flow metrics that we look at in the Actionable Agile tool, whether it's cycle time or work item aging or whatever, we as much as possible we like to define them from the customer's perspective. And it's just another tool that you have available, another insight into your data, into the overall health and performance and predictability of your process, that I think just looking at story points would never give you. Would just never.
No, I mean they're too abstract. I went back and looked at the essential document online that says that story points are 1 point to 1 day, and I'm like going, how on earth can you qualify that? It's like, I mean, why is it 1 story point 1 month? There's no justification between a point system and time, and it's not a common set of understandings either. So it was just bizarre.
A 50-50 split. I think there's definitely another conversation on this, but I'm a 50-50 split on it. That it has its place and there are benefits, but there's also places where it doesn't have its place. So
I think it gives a false expectation of control. And what it does by setting that false expectation of control is it forces developers to do things that are impossible. And I've seen developers crying because they're being asked to do 70 hours work in 20 because the points say that it's possible. And, they work all day and all night and all weekend. They never see their families. And that's cruelty.
Yeah, and that's my biggest. I guess maybe we are morphing into the future show of talking about story points, but that is. I mean, I think that's my. I mean, I think right there is my biggest problem with it is there may be some good from story points. I mean, I'm not necessarily convinced, but there may be. But even if there is, that good is far and away outweighed by the bad that they bring, and so it's just not worth it. And so I don't think you would ever open Pandora's box of story points, because I think just bad things are going to happen to you. From my perspective, like I said, mine not so humble.
Well, they do happen to people already, and that's what we know. What's the alternative? Because I mean, the intent of story points was actually to use as an interrogation tool around complexity. mean, that was the intent of them, that you would actually get people working with different skill sets in the room to look at pieces of work and say, what do you value this as and why? And can we come to a common understanding, or is there not a common understanding? If there's not a common understanding, why isn't there a common understanding? And I always use the, let's build a security system, let's build a login. Well, the login for a UI is like, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes to design. The logic is maybe, depending upon the data systems you're dealing with, maybe a week. But the back end system may be hugely complex. It might take you 3 to 4 months to build. Yet you end up with a point system that says it's not that complex, because the people who were there at that time say it was not that complex. And the back end guys are going, how on earth do we get this done in 2 weeks?
We definitely have a session on this, because I quite literally, I've got a few things I want to say on it, but I'm just going to elongate it on there. I do still believe that there is a place, but this is really interesting of where people feel it doesn't work. Go for it.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, Karl's brought the train around the zoo back to where we started, because to me, this is where the predictability piece comes in, and I know Storypoints was a reaction to complexity, but it turns out complexity is a terrible indicator of predictability, right? If all you're looking at is complexity, you will see that there's pretty much at least a zero and potentially a negative correlation between how complex you think something is and how long it will actually take to complete.
There isn't a connection.
Yeah. So anyway, Sabrina, I know you're trying to get us off this subject, but I thought we could.
I think it's the complexity conversation isn't about time. It's about what people need to do relative to each other and how they connect.
The problem is what the thing your customers care about, though, is time.
Yes. Yeah.
And so why are we using anything that our customers don't use? Our customers care about time. Let's talk about time.
So from when I was a Scrum Master a long time ago, we did it so that we could align within the teams, not so that we could say that something would take a certain amount of time, but so that we could understand what each piece of work meant to each other team. And so we get an alignment and an awareness of what other people faced by doing the work. It didn't determine the timelines in the slightest. What delivered the timelines was, when could we deliver a complete end-to-end customer journey? And therefore, we would actually attach all the pieces that would make that happen and prioritize them.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So the tools that you use, what are the tools that you would use? So you're saying we are moving into this remit on the story points, aren't we? We definitely need to get, so from Actionable Agile. So what are those tools? What type of reporting, what type of metrics can that actually provide? So if a customer came over and goes, you know, I need to do something different, so it's not working, what could it provide?
Well, the whole tool is based around these basic metrics of flow, things like cycle time, throughput, work in progress, and most importantly, work item age. And what we can do is we can take the data that the metrics, these metrics are measurements on our system. So we can take the data that these measurements are providing us, and we can start to turn them into probabilistic forecasts in terms of, all right, well, how long is it going to take me to get, say, this user story done? Or how long is it going to take me to get this epic done? Or how long is it going to take me to get these 100 user stories done? Based on, essentially based on how long it's taken us to do stuff in the past. It turns out in most of the time in our world, the past is actually a pretty good predictor of the future. Now, there's certain things that you have to have in place in order for that to really be a true statement. And that's way beyond the scope of this podcast, I'm sure. But like I said, the beauty of it is those metrics are defined from the perspective of the customer. So when our customer asks us, when will it be done, which they inevitably will, we're tracking data based on what they're seeing so we can communicate with them in their language. And to me, that's the true power of the flow metrics.
More realistic actual data.
Right.
Is it realism? I'm trying to think of what the right terminology would be, but it's actual realistic physical data by using the data from the past to be able to predict the future.
Maybe it's more objective than subjective. Maybe, I mean, maybe that's where you're going with this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not somebody's guess in terms of how complex or how long something should take. It's like, well, how long has it taken us in the past? And let's start making some forecasts based on that data.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for your time, Daniel. We will be getting you back on. We need to cover this story point. We definitely a conversation. Thank you ever so much for your time today, and we'll speak to you very soon.
Thank you very much.
The pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much for having me here, and I'm looking forward to those future discussions.
Oh, can't wait. Thank you.
Thanks.